it was really kind of interesting and sort of scary to see that the dialogue I saw on social media about that article a couple of years ago was heated enough. Now it was just explosive and toxic, and that basically if you don't immediately subscribe to one of these two camps and buy in every talking point, which to some people is that living somewhere like Missouri must be awful because, you know, of the perception about kind of the middle of America.
Sure.
And I'd already written the book, but it kind of confirmed the general message of the book, which is that we've stopped talking to each other completely. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So Welcome to the Bourbon Friday Show, where every Friday we take a short break, try a new bourbon, and meet someone awesome from the St. Louis startup scene. I'm excited today to be interviewing Dustin McKissen, who is the author of The Civil War at Home, his very first novel. So, Dustin, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'm excited about the book. I've got about halfway through it at this point.
Okay.
So I want you to tell us, give us a quick summary of it.
Yeah, so it's my first novel, and it's basically about two families, one liberal and one conservative, living in a Midwestern town that's really based on St. Charles, Missouri, though it's not called that in the book. But they get into an escalating feud that's kind of plays out on social media, and on the surface it's about politics, but it's fed by assumptions they make about race and class and economics and those other kind of hot button trigger issues, and ultimately the tragic outcome of those assumptions.
Interesting. Okay. I grew up in St. Charles, so this hits close to home here, I feel like.
Yeah.
It felt a little bit like that, the kind of suburbs thing going on in the book. So
yeah, I didn't grow up in St. Charles. My wife and I moved here about 6 years ago. And to me, even if I were driving around looking for a setting of like a Midwestern suburb town, St. Charles would be it. It happened to work nicely.
It's exactly what you would think of, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So what I think is really interesting about the book is you're obviously addressing a fairly heavy topic, so it's quite a lot to bite off in your first novel, right?
Yes.
But what it ultimately seems to come down to is you have, two kind of typical suburban Americans that have a lot more in common maybe than they realize.
Yeah.
But they just get to a point of hating each other, right? So it sounds like it's pretty topical to what's going on in our country right now. I mean, is that kind of the idea behind it, or?
Yeah, and in a way, it's kind of an expanded version in many ways of an article I wrote for CNBC. So I write for some different national publications on politics, and I wrote this article a couple of years ago that said I had originally seen a T-shirt where all of the blue states were America and all the red states were dumb fuckistan, essentially. And I've seen the reverse of that shirt.
Sure.
But I wrote an article for CNBC that talked about how, though I am personally liberal, I live in a very red state, in a very red part of the metropolitan area that I happen to live in. But I really like it, and I, didn't think my neighbor was a Nazi. I thought we had differences in opinion. And then I talked about my brother, who's also very liberal and lives in Seattle, but is, he has a beard down to here and builds hot rods and is no one's idea of a coastal elite, and how these labels are just feeding this sort of growing kind of explosive tipping point I think we're at. And it was funny because right before this published, that article went viral again 2 years later. I'm not sure why, but it was really kind of interesting and sort of scary to see that the dialogue I saw on social media about that article a couple of years ago was heated enough. Now it was just explosive and toxic, and that basically if you don't immediately subscribe to one of these two camps and buy in every talking point, which to some people is that living somewhere like Missouri must be awful because, of the perception about kind of the middle of America.
Sure.
And I'd already written the book, but it kind of confirmed the general message of the book, which is that we've stopped talking to each other completely. So,
wow, yeah. So this, like I said, heavy stuff, right?
Yeah,
How do you?
absolutely.
I mean, so did you have to do? I mean, obviously, a lot of stuff's pretty obvious at this point, right? You get on Facebook and you see the comment wars that are happening and people just tearing each other apart. Did you do any like kind of psychological research? Did you look into like kind of why this is happening at all, or do you have any ideas there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that honestly, it's not like America's always been united, and not like there's never been these deep divisions, but I do think social media plays such a huge part in it. It's not the only reason, and certainly, there's messages that need to be put on social media for them to even turn toxic in the first place.
Sure.
But, when I'm saying these things to other people about other people, I think on a deep psychological level, I sort of think I'm just doing it to a screen, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And not realizing the sort of impact that has on another person and then collectively society in general. So, I think that our kind of normal division and normal trigger points, I don't know if they're that different now than they ever were, but this sort of pumping it into your pocket 24 hours a day is what's different to me.
Sure.
And that plays a role in the book. I think we've all gotten, or not we've all, but many of us have gotten into a Facebook exchange that's gone bad, and we kind of lose sight of even the point we're trying to make. We're just trying to beat the other person down. I've done that. I've had friends that have done that, and that plays kind of a tipping point in the events of the novel.
So do you think there's a point where, because you get a little heated and you see these things, like, do we just switch to I need to win and it's all about winning now? Where does the neighborly love go at that point, so to speak?
I think it does often come down to about winning. And you see, to me, I see both political parties kind of flip-flopping on some really essential sort of parts of their platform they had. And when you do that, it's not, sometimes it's because you've collectively changed your mind on this issue, and that's possible and not a bad thing. But also it's, someone has taken this position and now I have to take the opposite, and now, one must win. And, and I see those interactions between people on Facebook too, that it just does become about winning and not about any sort of principle or, idea of wanting to get along with other people or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, I know that was in the book, one of the kind of themes is that these guys get on Facebook and then they get into these fights with each other that they wouldn't necessarily have had in person.
Yeah.
And I saw an interesting study, it was a couple months back, but they were talking about how they took the comments people were typing on Facebook, and instead they had them read them into a camera, right? So they had to record it as a video. And apparently the argument stopped. And the theory about kind of why was that you can't project, anger. You read something, you kind of put your own tone of voice, your own, emotion into it. And when it's a video, you have to take whatever they're giving. And most people are not writing or coming from a place of anger initially. It's just that it escalates there. So, as you're writing about this in the book, how do we deal with that? Do you have any suggestions about how to get away from that?
I don't know if there's a way to collectively deal with that as a society. But I do think that and here's what I've seen. After the CNBC article I just mentioned went viral again the second time, there was one liberal person who happened to really, really dislike me praising my red state neighbor. And they kept going with tweet after tweet. And eventually their tweet, in their mind, they made this sort of connection where it was because I said something kind about my red state neighbor, I must be a supporter of Donald Trump. And in turn, I must be a supporter of Brett Kavanaugh. Wow. And then the final sort of commentary is what from this person was, how would you like it if someone sexually assaulted your daughters? What was scary to me is that, the general comment was scary, but the article they were reading from didn't mention me having daughters. My Twitter account doesn't.
Oh, man.
It's not a state secret that I have two daughters, but I've been upset by things I've read. But have I been upset to the point where I took the author's name and pasted it into Facebook and then went looking through the pictures? I haven't. And I mentioned this to one of my also liberal friends, and their response was they immediately went to but Trump. But Trump nothing, because some third party, whether they're the president or not, says certain things or speaks a certain way, doesn't justify the way I act, So I think that there's, and I don't know how you do it, but there's a big personal accountability thing. I don't know that we can collectively mandate people being kinder to each other or restricting the way they interact, but you can certainly do it yourself. You can take a breath before you send the nastiest, meanest thing you can think of.
Sure, yeah. It's almost too easy, right?
Yeah.
Just type a few things, hit enter, and then it's there forever, right?
Yeah.
Some permanency that we don't maybe consider. So.
Yeah.
Well, I want to take a step back. You've said this a couple times, mentioned this article that went viral, and I think most people would be thinking, wait a second, this guy got viral articles, right? So you've got a pretty established following already. So you're a big deal on LinkedIn, if I understand this correctly, right?
Yeah, so about 4.5 years ago, I was actually managing trade associations, which is in the political space too, so I did have a little bit of a career there, but I was doing that, and I wrote a blog post on LinkedIn. Didn't have anything to do with trade associations or really my day job. It was actually about education and getting your MBA. That went viral, and then so I really liked that, and I kept writing a few, and I had no kind of idea of turning it into a career or a revenue generator, and I kept doing that, and probably about 5 months after doing that, I had an article on LinkedIn that was read by 500,000 people. And
holy cow. Okay.
I had a couple of people who read that article who contacted me about being a content consultant and communications consultant, and so I started doing that on the side. That's since grown into a company that works with clients. About half of them are in the St. Louis area, about half of them are outside of the St. Louis area, on messaging and content and that sort of thing. So that grew out of my writing on LinkedIn. But I kept writing, kept kind of growing a bigger following. Inc. magazine contacted me about writing a column for them. And then CNBC contacted me about writing for them, and it kind of grew into that to where now I can write on really most any publication I'm interested in writing for will take me, because that following on LinkedIn has grown to 100,000 people. And LinkedIn is a really interesting place to have a following. I know it's kind of maybe not the first place people think of when they think of a following.
It's getting bigger though. I mean, that's the past year or two, for sure.
On the business side of it, I mean, it's the one that's really nice because I can immediately see if that's someone I might be a potential client or have some sort of writing collaboration with. That's a little hard to get to on Twitter or Facebook. So it's been very valuable for me, and LinkedIn has been very good to me personally too. My articles on there have been read by about 15 million people to date.
Wow. Okay.
So it's been really great.
Yeah,
and that's how this all really got started. So
yeah, that's great. Yeah. So was that on purpose when you wrote the first article that did so well? Like, were you trying to build a following, or what happened there?
It was funny because I just read an article on LinkedIn, and I'd originally gone to school and studied creative writing. I switched to political science, but I'd always kind of written for trade journals or things that I had, had been a part of my career. But the LinkedIn thing came because I was reading an article talking about how essentially if you didn't get your MBA from Harvard, Stanford, or I think maybe Chicago, it was really a waste of your time. And I didn't get my MBA from those schools. They wouldn't have let me in. I got my MBA from a state school in Arizona where we lived, and it's been very valuable to me. And so I was kind of annoyed at the elitism and that sort of thing with that article. So I really wrote a response to that, and I think that hit a nerve with enough people that it started going around, and it was cool to see when that first happened, just going viral, and you feel a little bit famous for 24 hours, and then
tell me about that for a second. So you put the article out there. At what point did you kind of have a sense like, oh wow, people are digging this? Was it like right away, or how long does it take?
I think I posted it, and then I walked out of my basement where my desk was, and then I decided to just turn around and go see if anyone had looked at it yet. And by that point, there were like 600 people who had viewed it, and it was just within a couple of minutes.
Wow.
And then I kept refreshing it, and actually stayed awake throughout the night kind of seeing that. And it was cool. And that's really where it kind of started.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So I think, anytime I hear about this kind of story, first big successful article, and obviously you've built on it significantly since then. What happened before that? So I know you mentioned you'd already written for trade publications, so you've been practicing this stuff for a while. How long did it take to get to the point where you kind of got your first hit, so to speak?
Well, I mean, I had, it really wasn't something that was the first time I'd published anywhere in kind of a popular forum where I was really looking for that.
Okay.
But I think maybe to answer part of that question is, how does one prepare themselves to kind of get to that point?
Exactly, yeah.
And, writing's kind of a funny art because we all write at some point, usually during the day, right? We write an email or a memo or a text message. We don't all paint or sculpt every day, right? So, and I think sometimes people lose sight of that there's a level of, I think, even inherent talent to writing, but there's a lot more work and a lot more learning too. And a lot of times when I have people talk to me about how to get published or how to do this, they're really focused on the mechanics of publishing, and by that I mean how do I make contact with editors? Which publications do I contact? How do I get my stuff on Forbes or Inc? Because that would be great for my startup, even in this environment. So the focus is on that, and the focus isn't on writing, right? Like to become a better writer, you need to read more, you need to work at it, you need to read things that you find to be good writing, and it's just a lot of work. I mean, even after I had that first viral article, I know that my articles now are much better than they were then. It's like,
keep getting them.
Just keep at it. Time, work, and there's a little bit of talent there too.
So one thing that stands out to me about that particular article that went viral initially is that you're passionate about the topic, matters, personally to you, but it's also a little bit controversial. You're taking a side, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's, I've seen that advice a bunch of times on social media is like, you want to be controversial because you got to get people to either say, hell yes or hell no, so to speak. But obviously, back to the book, like we can see how things can get too controversial, maybe more often than they used to. So how do you kind of walk that edge, so to speak?
For me, it's that I agree with that. I've had people come to me on the client side, and CEOs and that sort of thing, and wanting to expand their platform. And often when you, they come immediately with avoid politics, avoid controversial issues, a list of 5 things to avoid, and then they inevitably usually want to write an article that has 3 to 5 points about leadership. Well, there are billions of those articles, right? And you've got to, if you want people to notice, you've got to say something you truly believe in. And I think if you truly believe in it, it's almost always something you're taking a stand on, right? We all, most of us love cupcakes, right? So you don't feel that sort of passionate thing. But if it's like, if you really love St. Louis, for example, it means you love St. Louis better than other places. You're not just a general fan of Midwestern former industrial cities. You love this, and you love it better, and you think it's better than somewhere else. And so I think if you start from that sort of passion for something, it's inevitable that you'll be taking a stand. And I know that with the things I've written about, not just politics, but things I've had strong opinions on, there's about half the people I immediately will never work with me, right? And that's fine, because if they didn't learn who I was through my writing, they would learn who I am when we work together. There's another half of people that feel completely the opposite. And I think that if you're talking about building a platform and wanting people to hear what you have to say, the idea that you're going to strike upon something that everyone loves means you've so diluted it to the point where it's not even worth writing about to
for anybody at that point. And I think that's, it's a fair point for any business. I mean, we deal with marketing, that's our, industry. And so we see that all the time where somebody will say, they want to go after everyone, so essentially they attract no one, right? Because if you go after a specific person, you're going to attract more people like them, but you're going to push other people away. And I think that pushing other people away part, which generally scares people, is actually a real big benefit, right? Because you're talking about, hey, I'd rather somebody read something and decide we're not going to work well together than to get 3 months into working together and decide this isn't working, right? So that, I think that's a part, especially business owners can overlook, right? Is that can be a benefit to us sometimes.
And for me, I know several of my clients don't see the world the same way I do, but they actually respect, and I respect that about them too. And we can get into, we're able to get into civil discussions, and often our work doesn't go into those areas, but you get to be friends with people and you talk about what you believe. And it almost sounds like golden rule level advice, but I think people really respect someone who has a position more than someone who's trying to please everyone, even if they don't agree with their position. And that's the kind of people you want to surround yourself with anyway. So
that's a good point. All right. Well, good stuff. I appreciate it. So obviously the final question I got for you is, we got a 2-part question.
Okay.
You got a big following on LinkedIn, so how can people find you there?
Just look me up, Dustin McKissen, McKissen, and you can follow me or connect with me. People believe different things about LinkedIn, that you shouldn't accept requests from strangers. All the people I work with, I didn't know 5 years ago. So go ahead and connect with me.
All right, awesome. And then obviously, maybe even more important, how do they get the book?
Absolutely. You can buy it in 2 places. You can ask your bookstore, I guess 3 places. You can ask your bookstore if they carry it. You can order it online through Amazon or through the publisher, Working Class Books. And then it's also available in the St. Louis and St. Charles library systems.
Oh, really? Cool. Very awesome. All right, well, we got a couple minutes left, so at this point, we're going to invite the founder of Bourbon Friday himself, Eric, on. And Eric is, I mean, we got 3 bottles over here today, Eric, so you're going to have to explain what's going on
What is going on? So often on the show, it's usually a pretty expensive bottle.
Okay.
Which might not be that approachable for everybody that watches, don't want to go out and spend $50 or more on a bottle. So I actually went with the other end, which is Old Crow. Right?
Old Crow, man.
Old Crow.
Classic.
And the reason we have the other bottles back there is the Old Crow was, there's a longer story I'll get into in a second, but Old Crow is basically, I think, the youngest aged bourbon from Jim Beam. The rest of those bottles over there, I think it's around 3. Distiller's Cut is 6, and then Knob Creek is around 9.
Okay.
And so later we're going to be doing a tasting here to sort of see what aging actually does.
Oh, okay.
But Old Crow is such an old name. It's pre-Civil War, 1838, and it's one of, it's very often referred by a lot of authors. Mark Twain's favorite bourbon, Hunter S. Thompson, Jack London. So I figured that was a pretty good fit. And
it's good enough for Mark Twain. It's good enough for us, right? So.
Exactly. And then another connection there is Civil War at Home. Famously, people were complaining during the actual Civil War about Ulysses S. Grant and his drinking. And Abraham Lincoln famously said, find out what Grant drinks and send it to the rest of my generals. That was Old Crow.
Oh, really?
Very cool.
Okay. Man.
Very cool.
I got to ask, because like now Old Crow is like cheap whiskey, right?
Very cheap.
Has it always been that way? Or
I think what used to be a more premium brand, and it just sort of over the years exchanged hands, and now it's just this brand.
It's like PBR. It was a blue ribbon winner, but kind of traveled back down the ladder.
Things have gotten better on the other side of the spectrum, so to speak.
I still like PBR.
I do too.
Yeah, very cool. All right, so that brings us to the end of the show. Eric, as always, thanks for joining us. Dustin, definitely appreciate it.
Thank you.
So for those of you watching, this is the Bourbon Friday Show, which is held here at T-Rex every Friday at 4:30. So we'd definitely like to thank T-Rex for hosting us. The event runs 4 to 7, so if you'd like to join us, please RSVP and head on down. We'd love to have you. Thank you to EQ for always hosting the stream of the Bourbon Friday Show on your Facebook page. And I'd also like to thank Vanessa Lobo, my business partner at Connect Marketing, for producing our show every single week. Thank you for tuning in. Please join us again next Friday at 4:30.
Hey, thanks for watching. We truly hope you enjoyed it. Please like and share this episode, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out. To stay up to date, follow us on social. We are at Bourbon Fridays on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok. See you next time.